Hi, my name is Pamela Coons, Associate Professor of Medicine in the Division of Oncology at Yale School of Medicine and Yale Cancer Center. I'm excited to announce ASCO's new open access journal, JCO Oncology Advances. As the inaugural editor-in-chief, I hope to support JCO Oncology Advances to become the premier platform to bridge the gap between accessible scientific research and clinical care. Stay tuned for more information, including new article types, at ascopubs.org/JCO Oncology Advances. We look forward to seeing your submissions in spring of 2024.
Hi, I'm Pat Loehrer, Director of Global Oncology and Health Equity at Indiana University. I'm here with Dave Johnson, a colleague and friend and medical oncologist at the University of Texas Southwestern in Dallas, Texas. This is the second half of our Oncology Etc. conversation with Principal Deputy Director of the NCI and Chief of the Intramural Laboratory of Cellular Oncology in the Center for Cancer Research, Dr. Doug Lowy. In part one, we chatted with Dr. Lowy about his interest in cancer, which was developed through his personal academic experiences, including that of his parents, as well as his groundbreaking work on the HPV vaccine with Dr. John Schiller. Today, we're going to continue our conversation with Dr. Lowy by asking him about overcoming the hesitancy of taking vaccines in the era of COVID.
Pat, it's very difficult. There was some vaccine hesitancy when the HPV vaccine was introduced initially. My view is that the people you want to speak to and with are the people whose minds can be changed. So I don't try to change the minds of people who are opposed to vaccination for one reason or another, but instead try to talk with people about evidence, but directing it towards those people whose minds potentially can be changed. A big advantage with the HPV vaccine is that this has been going on over a number of years. With COVID, everything happened in a greatly truncated way so that the vaccine was introduced less than a year after the pandemic. But concomitant with that was a lot of vaccine hesitancy. And I think that that's going to be difficult to overcome. What I have really worried about is whether the vaccine hesitancy associated with COVID might extend to other vaccines and not just to the HPV vaccine, but to childhood vaccines, etc. The national data for 2020 and 2021 for HPV vaccination is almost counterintuitive and provisionally reassuring, both compared to 2019, the last full year without the pandemic. The number of people being vaccinated with the HPV vaccine went up between 19 and 20, and between 20 and 21 went up again. So at least by that metric and through that time, it doesn't look as though the vaccine hesitancy associated with COVID is extending to the HPV vaccine, at least in the short term. So what we've seen between 2019 and 2021 is that HPV vaccine uptake among teenagers actually has gone up each year. So at least in the short term, the vaccine hesitancy associated with the COVID vaccine does not seem to have extended to the HPV vaccine.
So, Doug, I'm going to shift gears just a little bit. I read recently in Science that China had overtaken the United States in terms of scientific publication and impact. And I'm wondering what you think about that and what we need to do to retain our longstanding leadership in that role, or does it really matter?
If China's research, if their quality is outstanding, I mean, there's nothing wrong with another country making important contributions to biomedical research. I don't see this per se as a competition. Perhaps it's because I'm just looking at it through the lens of cancer research, and we think that cancer research is much too big to be done exclusively through support of NCI, exclusively in the United States, etc. So to me, if other countries are doing high quality research, that can help people all over the world with regard to cancer.
Let me ask you this, Doug. You've been at the NCI for 50 years, and I calculated that you've served under 9 presidents, and of the NCI's 16 directors, you've served with 10 of them.
Really ancient. Thank you.
So with all that, what do you think about the importance of the NCI? And then also, we'll ask you a little bit about the reflections of the directors and lessons learned from them, and maybe some good stories. So where do you think the NCI stands, and why is it important for the world and for the country?
What's really important is the funding from Congress. It is long-term and sustained. Cancer research can't be done in 2 or 3 years. It just takes a while to do really high quality cancer research. And what really counts from my perspective is you can rely on the government to be strongly supporting cancer research through the NCI. In other words, private philanthropy is very important, but private philanthropy can decide tomorrow we don't want to be doing what we have been doing. It's very much like pharmaceutical companies. They can decide that they're not going to be doing it, but it's almost impossible for us to say, we're no longer going to support basic science research, okay? We're not interested in investigator-initiated research because, of course, we are. And that's the bedrock of development. We can't say we're no longer interested in doing clinical trials because, of course, we are, because we can't make the progress that we need to make without clinical trials. We can't say we're not interested in doing implementation research because it's one thing to have a new approval. It's something else to have it widely and equitably disseminated, and doing some kind of research with implementation science is critically important. And this applies for prevention, screening, diagnosis, treatment, survivorship, all of these areas that NCI supports and will continue to support. The proportion may vary from one year to another, from one director to another, but all of those areas are going to continue to be supported.
So, Doug, during your various tenures as the interim director, what program or programs are you most proud about?
Instead of programs that I'm most proud of, I would say that working with NCI staff is what enables the achievement. The mission of the NCI is just incredible, and virtually everyone on the staff buys into the mission, which is to help people live longer and healthier lives through research-related advances in cancer. That's what people do. The first time when I was acting director was the first cancer moonshot. So I was involved in that. But tremendous amount of credit needs to go to the Obama administration for wanting to do it, to the Congress for its strong bipartisan support for the initial cancer moonshot, and to my NCI colleagues. And then extramurally, for everybody really got on board and tried to do things. So this is very much a team effort, and it's not limited to NCI. Extramural colleagues are critically important to everything that we do.
Doug, you've alluded to the fact that you've served under so many different presidents and directors, and they all have different leadership styles. If you were going to be a mentor on leadership, what advice would you give to the listeners as what makes a good leader, and perhaps what makes a not so good leader too?
I think that there is a spectrum. There are some people who lead by intimidation and some people who lead by example. And all of them can be effective leaders. My own view is that I like to lead by example because I really feel that that leads to very high morale. People who lead by intimidation may get a lot of work out of people, but it is nowhere near as satisfying as knowing that you are an extraordinarily highly valued member of a team and that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So I think that having tremendous admiration and respect for the people that you work with is absolutely number one. And number two is listening to them. You don't always need to do what they advise, but people really thrive on being listened to. And everybody wants to make a difference. And so help them to achieve that goal. When they look good, you will look good.
So, Doug, I'm attending on the general medical wards right now. Just got asked today by the medical students to give them some advice about the future of oncology and where did I think it was going. Before I go back and meet with them, I'd love to get your thoughts.
Well, the future of oncology is extraordinarily bright. On the one hand, we've made tremendous progress. On the other hand, there are still 600,000 people dying every year in the United States from cancer, and worldwide, the problem is even greater. But what's going to happen in the future is we will understand the causes of cancer better, and so that will enable us to prevent more cancers. I think there's going to be an enormous increase in the opportunities for screening and to reduce either the incidence of cancer or increase the outlook for people with cancer, because asymptomatic cancer will be diagnosed at a substantially earlier time point. And then when it comes to treatment, my view is we've barely scratched the surface. The opportunities for making drugs, immuno-oncology, and who knows what other areas lie in front of us are almost limitless. The Biden administration has a goal for the reignited cancer moonshot of decreasing the mortality rate over the next 25 years by 50%. What I think we need to do is to decrease mortality over the next 25 years by even more than that. And in addition, to make progress against those cancers where progress thus far has been limited. Take pancreatic cancer as a specific example. 10 years ago, the RAS oncoproteins were thought to be undruggable targets. But last year, we had the first approval from the FDA of a RAS-specific inhibitor. The good news is that can target about half of lung cancer that has mutant RAS. The bad news is it targets very few people with pancreatic cancer who have mutant RAS. On the other hand, there now are G12D inhibitors where there's excellent preclinical data and hopefully sometime next year be starting clinical trials. G12D mutations account for about half of people with pancreatic cancer. If the success there mirrors the success that we've seen thus far with lung cancer, it means that we are potentially on the way to actually making a difference in outlook for people with pancreatic cancer. But I just see this as one of many opportunities as time goes forward.
You did this week something that no one has done, and that is to turn the reins of the directorship of the Cancer Center over to the first woman director, Monica Bertagnolli. What was in your letter that you left on the desk that you gave her? What kind of advice did you give her?
My advice that I gave her was really, how can I help you the best and the most?
That's awesome advice, no doubt about it. It's a really historical moment. And of course, we who are members of ASCO are particularly proud that Monica has taken the reins as a former ASCO president. And Doug, we really appreciate your taking the time to spend with us. It's been incredibly interesting, and congratulations on an amazing career.
Absolutely.
And also thanks to our listeners tuning in to Oncology, etc. As you know, this is an ASCO Educational Podcast where Pat and I will talk about just about anything. If you have an idea for a topic or a guest you'd like us to interview, please, by all means, email us at education@asco.org.
Thank you for listening to the ASCO Education Podcast. To stay up to date with the latest episodes, please click subscribe. Let us know what you think by leaving a review. For more information, visit the Comprehensive Education Center at education.asco.org.
The purpose of this podcast is to educate and to inform. This is not a substitute for professional medical care and is not intended for use in the diagnosis or treatment of individual conditions. Guests on this podcast express their own opinions, experience, and conclusions. Guest statements on the podcast do not express the opinions of ASCO. The mention of any product, service, organization, activity, or therapy should not be construed as an ASCO endorsement.